it may take us a little bit longer now to go from 12.4 into 12.5. Like they're going to continue to work on 12.4. I think it will roll out to more and more customers. They'll solve some of these issues. It will probably be better in a lot of ways, but still have, two steps forward, one step back. It'll still, like, I don't know that 12.4 will ever be better than 12.3 in the specific areas of smoothness that 12.3 was exceptional in.
So 12.4.2 was late, but it was finally started to be rolled out to at least non-employees, although it seems to be just a few at this point, just a handful. So what is happening? And so Elon's explanation for that, he says, sorry for the delay. This release had far fewer interventions, but suffered in driving smoothness. Part of the issue was too much training on interventions and not enough on normal driving. It's like a doctor training too much on patients in the emergency room versus training on preventative care. So when they launched 12.4, we were all expecting a huge jump. And the way I'm interpreting what he's saying is that yes, there was a jump in interventions, but they forgot to train it enough on just normal driving. So there is now issues. He says our next gen AI model after this has a lot of promise. 5 times increase in parameter count, which is very difficult to achieve without upgrading the vehicle inference computer. So I want to ask you what he meant by that. He then said, yeah, so long as the information compression efficiency is held reasonably constant, a higher parameter count is a representation of how well it understands the nuances of reality. Can you explain what he's saying?
Yeah, so parameter count is just the number of basically little knobs that can be settings in the neural network. And this is something that we have seen, you know, at very large effect in just the overall AI world, and especially in the realm of these large language models like ChatGPT. That the larger you make the model, the more parameters, and usually they're measured in billions of parameters or potentially even trillions of parameters, the more capable you can make that neural net system. It can understand the complexities and the nuances of reality, of language, at a deeper level. And then they can, when you run those models, they can have a, just higher quality set of output. And so what he's saying there is that there's a level right now of compression that's possible that you can take, we'll say, trillions of gigabytes worth of video data, and you can get a model to accurately reflect the nuances of all of that data in we'll just say a constant size model. For instance, maybe it's several gigabytes worth of model weights is what it ends up being. That's a very large compression to get trillions of gigabytes of video data to be understood, like the deep level understanding of that data in a few gigabytes worth of numbers. Um, and if that ratio of the input data size to the model size is held constant, then you need a bigger model in order to get better levels of understanding. And over a short time frame, that's what you basically have, that you're not really improving the amount of compression that you can do. You can't have a better understanding with a smaller model size until you do things to improve your architecture, or you've got to get really creative and figure out ways in order to change that ratio. And so I think that's one of the things that Tesla's working on. And it looks like 12.4 is an experiment where they said, okay, these are the issues that we're having, and we're going to put more of those pieces of data into the data set that trains the model. And if we want to have the same model size, then we're going to take out some of the normal driving data so that we can still have the same total data total size of the data set that's being used to train. And so they played with the ratio. They said more intervention data we're going to train on to do less of that, but it's going to come at the cost of not having quite as much normal driving data. And so while they were able to actually achieve their goal of reducing interventions, it also meant that the normal driving smoothness
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the things that are very important to customers as far as customer experience and having confidence in the vehicle, making sure that you understand it, it's not doing things that, while safe, are annoying or frustrating. And so I think this is just a big learning experience for Tesla. No one has really solved this problem all the way. And so trying to figure out the exact correct composition of the data training set that you need is part of what it takes to solve this problem. And Tesla's right there on the forefront of trying to do that. I'm really glad that they've done this experiment, and now it gives them more information about, okay, the next one, how do we solve that? And so the fact that they are doing a larger model, that is going to be a difficult model to fit onto hardware 3, at least at first. There's things that they can do over time, I think, to try and get that model to run well on hardware 3. And we'll just have to see how Tesla handles that
Yeah.
back and forth and those engineering compromises and challenges. But when he did say difficult, he didn't say impossible. So I think it may take us a little bit longer now to go from 12.4 into 12.5. Like, they're going to continue to work on 12.4. I think it will roll out to more and more customers. They'll solve some of these issues. It will probably be better in a lot of ways, but still have, two steps forward, one step back. It'll still, like, I don't know that 12.4 will ever be better than 12.3 in the specific areas of smoothness that 12.3 was exceptional in. Um, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. They can try and fix those problems ultimately in 12.5 and beyond.
Mhm.
But it may take us a while for them to figure out how to get 12.5 out into the hands of customers, because if it is a much bigger model, they're going to have to do new things that they haven't done before.
Sounds like that they're still learning, which is like, they're still trying to figure out how to do it right. That's the part that I think was a bit of, we were hoping that they'd already knew how to keep iterating. Omar says this: it feels like Tesla's struggling to learn how to iterate on FSD with the new end to end architecture. It seems to be difficult to drive down the error rate while also preserving all the positive aspects of the driving model. The process of iterating on FSD is now very different. Ash Martian asks the question: are they able to validate and test the model's performance in a simulator? Yes. So, this is another separate thing that we saw out there. This photo came out, and Charles Theang says, thanks, Elon, for leading the liquid cooling technology to large AI data centers. This may lead to preserving 20 billion trees for our planet. We see this photo, and it just shows you that there is a large AI data center. This is a nice photo we haven't seen before, and they're talking about liquid cooling technology. So this could be what they're training FSD on, and this is what we're waiting to get up and running, right?
Yeah, I think that, in all likelihood, this is the new data center that's being built in Austin in the extension. And I think we had heard that they were going to do some liquid cooling on it. And so, that allows them to operate these training and inference training computers at much higher clock rates, and really pushing the limits because you can cool them much faster. But I mean, this is one of the world's largest supercomputers that you're talking about here. It's not but it's up there. And I think it's probably, from the sound of it, potentially going to be the only one of its size with liquid cooling, which is very groundbreaking and a very difficult technical challenge to solve once again. And the purpose of having this is, once again, to go back to what I said. This whole system is going to be set up to train models specifically for hardware 4 that take advantage of the extra speed and power of the hardware 4 computer compared to hardware 3. But also, all of that is going to be processing data from the better cameras that hardware 4 has, which have a much higher data output. And so you have to have higher bandwidth in order to process all the pixels that are coming in on these much higher resolution cameras. And those models, I think, give Tesla back some headroom. I think, while it's there's quite a debate in among technical people about, is hardware 3 going to be capable of the robotaxi version of full self-driving once we finally get to that point. There are strong people in both camps. James Douma definitely says, or leans on the side that we don't know what the upper limit of hardware 3 is, and that you can usually expend more engineering time in order to get more performance out of old hardware like that. And so it's very possible, at least, that hardware 3 can in fact be a robotaxi capable hardware platform. But in the process of getting to that point, it's nice to have a set of hardware that has lots of extra room to explore and do things and try new things, use bigger models to begin with, and then potentially over time shrink those, maybe faster speeds or whatever the case may be. It allows them to do more experiments faster at a higher level to find the actual solution that is robotaxi. And then once they have that, then they can go to work on really refining the quality of that solution and trying to make it backwards compatible to the hardware 3 vehicles if we can't get to that robotaxi version with hardware 3 to begin with.
Thank you for explaining that comment about hardware 3 versus hardware 4. We'll see what happens there, but appreciate that. I want to get to Frida Dwan. So Frida Dwan is an analyst that works for Altimeter Capital. Brad Gerstner, yeah, he's well known. He was always on the All In podcast. He's an investor, early investor in Uber. He Altimeter Capital started investing significantly in Tesla, and Frida Dwan has been doing tremendous work, doing research, almost like what ARK Invest does. In some cases, even better. So here's what she said. Frida said, "I just finished a 1-week trip to China. I've now survived all the major, about 20 L2 self-driving and robotaxi vehicles in both the US and China." So she's tested out this self-driving tech that's out there. Some thoughts and observations. So first she said, I've tested major brands like Huawei, Li Auto, NIO, Xiaopeng, and Xiaomi. Overall, they exceeded my expectations. The rides were not overly cautious and handled complex situations. Yes, the road conditions in China are very challenging quite well. Okay, so it speaks highly of the Chinese robotaxi and full self-driving. Nothing compares to Tesla's approach, though. I see imitation learning end-to-end as the only effective approach for self-driving. She's pointing out that none of these guys have yet, a couple of them, I think, Huawei and Li, have started using
And I think
neural
Xiaopeng.
nets. Xiaopeng. While Chinese peers perform well on main roads, they struggle on frontage roads due to reliance on the high-precision maps and rule-based methods. So this is LiDAR, and they're still using code. They're not yet switched to neural nets. And so, yeah, they look like they're doing really well on the main roads, but it's not really, like it's kind of almost kind of limited what they can actually do. Cars stopped in the middle of the road when there was no clear white lining. Okay, so that's, an issue. Chinese electric vehicle self-driving capabilities are far ahead of those from US and Europe brands. She's talking about the other brands outside of Tesla. I doubt any Chinese players can profit from L2 self-driving, though. Wow. Not because it's not useful, but because it's hard to differentiate, and price wars dominate the market in China. It's almost like a table stakes. You have to have this in China. Chinese consumers and regulators seem much more receptive to self-driving. Even with a 5 out of 10 self-driving capability, cars are practically hands-free. Insurance-wise, for L3 plus cars, OEMs bear responsibility for incidents. So OEMs avoid labeling cars as L3 plus, level 3 plus. So before I move on, thoughts on what you've read there?
Yeah, one of the things that it's good to hear from her is just her experience with those Chinese products that really kind of reflects that they are similar in a lot of ways to the other robotaxi systems that we have here in the United States that are operating by, companies like Waymo and Cruise, that they are exceptional, potentially in the areas where they can operate, but they have limited areas of being able to function, and they aren't necessarily things that can extend to other areas very well. And those hard, like having the sensors, the LiDAR sensors, and relying on handwritten human code, both of those things just create challenges that are very, very difficult to overcome. And that is still the case in China, the same way it is here in the United States, that, no matter how good they can get a specific route or a specific city, that doesn't necessarily mean that they can take that and then move it to a new place and have it work well. And it requires a lot of effort to get each and every one of those areas working properly. So to hear her comments basically say that, until these companies can really adopt the Tesla approach all the way, that they just have a cap on how good they can
Yeah.
be and how much they can operate.